Welcome back. This is Why I Will Know Date These Guys, a podcast exploring sex, dating, and relationships among millennials and Zoomers. I'm Naomi Guy, and that's
Joel Guy.
And yeah, we're here today to discuss a book that Joel read.
Everybody Poops. It's a great book.
Red fish, blue fish. Wait, was it one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
You got it in two.
Yep.
That's pretty incredible, Naomi.
Yep, thank you.
I will have to say, Everybody Poop contains some very important lessons for me, such as a one-hump camel has a one-hump poop. A two-hump camel has a two-hump poop. Just kidding.
Is it bigger? Is the two-hump poop bigger?
I don't know why our parents felt the need to buy us a book about the natural process of pooping. I think it really reflects on how stupid we were as children.
Yep, I think it does.
Okay. Naomi, what are we trying today?
Today, I don't know. I don't have the label.
That's fair. We are trying Zia Ginger Ale. I saw this at our local Fry's. It is ginger ale made with ginger, red chili, and lime. I think it is a local brand, given the decorations on the side. Nope. Microbrewed in New Mexico.
That's local in terms of geography.
Sure. Well, let's take a sip.
I don't like that.
It'd be good as a mixer.
It's like the LaCroix version of ginger ale.
Yeah, it's like ginger-flavored sweet water.
Yeah.
I'm getting hints of that red chili and lime, not to the extent I would like.
Red chili and lime. That's like such a weird thing to put.
It's an interesting combination. It's very New Mexico.
I just like my ginger with a little bit more kick.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it would be good as a mixer in a drink. That'd be a good, like, Moscow Mule, maybe.
Yeah.
But drinking straight, there's others I prefer. Like Dad's root beer. Or Triple X brewed in Bloomington, Indiana. Naomi, before we get into the topic of today's podcast, which should be evident to our listeners, given that they clicked on the episode to download it or stream it, I did want to briefly catch up. It's been a while since we've recorded a podcast,
that is very
just
true.
the two of us in person. What have you been up to in the last month or so?
Well, the last time we recorded, I had COVID.
Nice.
So that was quite a while ago. Since then, I have recovered from COVID. I went to Peru for 3 weeks, came back. Now I can officially be like, my tan is from South America.
That's the worst thing you've ever said.
I got really sick in Peru, had to go to a clinic. I had a bacterial infection in my tonsils. I don't know what's up with me having bacterial infections this year. I'm fully recovered from that, had a nasty cough. My boyfriend said that I sounded like a 1969 Camaro whenever I
He says
coughed.
the sweetest things.
Yeah.
Why will no one date this, Lynn? It's because of analogies.
What else has been going on? I did service projects while I was down there, and I took a class, and now I'm back in school. I'm taking microbiology and like women in the 21st century. I think that's what I'm taking right now. Feminist class, that's all I know. And yeah, now we're back in the studio. And by studio, I mean our kitchen table. Joel just got a new one, so this is exciting. We're just sitting here.
That's where all of our Patreon money's going.
Yeah.
It's a new kitchen table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, dear listeners. We were supposed to get better insulation and soundproofing, but instead I'm like, I want to sit on a fancy mid-century modern table. And here we are.
He's actually just trying to be funny. He didn't spend our Patreon money on that. He's been donating all of our Patreon money to good causes that we support.
Yeah, but I don't want our listeners thinking we're good people. I wouldn't want to mislead them in that direction.
So what have you been up to the last month?
I probably shouldn't have asked that question without a good answer already prepped. I've been concerned about women's rights and
we all have.
The current state of the United States as a whole. To be clear, these are not hobbies I've picked up recently. It's just become slightly more pressing in recent times. So I've been working with a local group. I won't be plugging them, I don't think, on the podcast, but we are attempting to do tabling to pass some constitutional amendments to the Arizona Constitution, which would guarantee women certain rights in Arizona. And then we are also trying to raise awareness about the importance of unions and the importance of housing co-ops so that people recognize that they should not have to fight horrible landlords on their own. So we're doing some fun work. I'm enjoying my work there. It is not terrible. I'll say that.
We had an event last weekend where family came to town, and Joel decided that he was going to actually spend a lot of time doing advocacy last weekend. So he'd come to a family event and then leave like an hour in. He'd be like, I gotta go.
I just hate my relatives.
I gotta go protest for women's rights. And I was like, go off, King. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I got tear gassed in Minecraft.
In Minecraft? Allegedly.
We can get into that next time.
Yeah.
Naomi, we are assembled here today to talk about another amazing guide to relationships. We've discussed The Gift of Fear, which is all about how much women love their husbands.
Yep.
We've talked about Steve Harvey's Act Like a Lady, Think Like a
Yep.
Man, which was
Yep.
the least sexist thing I've ever read. And now I want to talk about...
No, we also talked about why does he do that?
I wasn't limiting us to only 2 books. But now I want to talk about a book specifically about relationships, trying to solve the problem, the age-old question of why men and women don't always get along. And that book is called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Naomi, have you heard about this book before?
I have, but I think the first thing that comes to mind when you name the title is that one thing that you hear in schoolyards. It's like, boys are from Jupiter. Wait, boys get stupider.
I thought I was unprepared for this.
That's the first thing that comes to mind when you say those things.
Oh, okay. The only thing I remember from the schoolyard is people constantly digging up the ground and being like, we're looking for Indian clay to make ornaments. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing, I guess.
I forgot that we went to the same school and we were around the same people for a while. Yeah. And that just brought back a lot of memories that I didn't want.
Well, when I think of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, my thought had always been, oh, that's like some somewhat successful relationship self-help book from the 1990s.
Yeah.
And having read that, I'm like, yep, that's a relationship self-help book from the 1990s. Because there's a lot of outdated / completely untrue information in it. I don't think it's all bad. I am going to heap some praise on certain sections, which I think do a good job of articulating some of the mental states that people might possess in relationships and why it's important to talk about them. But in general, I think it just perpetuates a bunch of sexist stereotypes. So before we actually discuss the content of the book, because there's a lot to unpack.
There always is.
I want to talk briefly about the author, relationship counselor John Gray. Part of this is taken from Wikipedia. He has a very extensive article talking about his background with a lot of links to...
I need to pause you. I'm sorry. You said that this person is actually credible and actually knows what he's talking about before he wrote a book? That's insane to me.
No. This says he's a relationship counselor. I don't know if that's true.
Okay. I'm just saying that the vast majority of the books that we've read and we've criticized have been with people that have no right talking about relationships.
I don't know. Steve Harvey slept with a lot of women who aren't his wife. He might know a thing or two about relationships.
That's very fair. Yeah. I will give you that one.
Okay, so before my sister rudely interrupted me...
I'm so sorry.
We were talking about a book written by, quote, American author and relationship counselor John Gray, after he had earned degrees in meditation and taken a correspondence course in psychology.
Oh, God.
So according to Naomi, that qualifies him to talk about this stuff.
Hey, you take one semester of psychology in college, you are a psychologist.
Yeah. The book states that the most common relationship problems between men and women are a result of fundamental psychological differences between the sexes, which the author exemplifies by means of his eponymous metaphor, that men and women are from distinct planets, men from Mars and women from Venus, and that each sex is acclimated to its own planet's society and customs, but not to those of the other. This book's had a minor cultural impact, Naomi. It sold more than 15 million copies. According to a CNN report, it was the highest-ranked work of nonfiction in the 1990s, spent 121 weeks on the bestseller list. Of course, it's spawned a number of other media. There's been a number of subsequent books by John Gray, recordings, seminars, theme vacations, one-man Broadway show, TV sitcom, workout videos, a podcast, men and women's apparel lines, fragrances, travel guides, and his and hers salad dressings.
Ooh. Wait, so is like his like ranch and the
obviously
woman's is like
Caesar.
Balsamic vinegar or something? Yeah. Okay.
Caesar and Cleopatra.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So John Gray was born in 1951. In his youth, I believe at age 18 or 19, he spent 9 years with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a spiritual guru of the 1960s and 70s who popularized transcendental meditation. There's a lot to unpack there. Basically, transcendental meditation is like focused meditation, depending on who you talk to. Some people are like, oh, if you meditate hard enough, you'll be able to change the world. Other people are like, no, this is just like a self-help way of like processing stuff. But he received a bachelor's and master's degree in the science of creative intelligence. Those sources vary on whether these degrees were received from either the non-accredited Maharishi European Research University in Switzerland or the accredited Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Ohio. Sorry, Iowa. I don't know why I'm suddenly getting dyslexic with state names. Gray received the unaccredited PhD in 1982 from Columbia Pacific University, a now defunct institution located in San Rafael, California, upon completion of a correspondence course, and an honorary doctorate from Governor State University in Illinois after he delivered their commencement address in 2002. Gray married self-help...
You give one speech and you're suddenly a doctor.
Honorary doctor. Yeah, always ask your doctors if they're a doctor or an honorary doctor. It's important.
Taylor Swift, I think, is a doctor now of fine arts from NYU.
I have no problem with that, as long as she doesn't write a relationship
But I
book.
think she's an honorary doctor because she didn't actually stop. I'm going to stop.
Gray married self-help author Barbara DeAngelis, and they divorced in 1984, after which he reevaluated his ideas about relationships. Gray married his second wife, Bonnie, in 1986, and she died of cancer in 2018. So we have an individual who may or may not have education. What we do know is his PhD was done in a correspondence course, and when you're dealing with issues like relationship counseling, you might think that in-person study would be good.
Nah.
So you're not just like faxing in answers to Okay. Also, he was divorced at least once. So like Steve Harvey can talk all about the problems in his past relationships.
I thought Steve Harvey was on his third marriage.
Steve Harvey is on his third marriage.
Yeah, so he has lots of advice.
I don't recall if Steve Harvey discussed his past relationships in Men Are From Mars.
No.
I don't know. Okay, but Mr. Gray definitely does not. He makes a passing reference once or twice, but does not linger on why he was such a horrible partner in the past. And I could not find any information about that.
He didn't talk about his former wife. He only talked about his wife at the time that he wrote the book.
Right, and I do recall that weird anecdote where he's at, like, the comedy club, and she walks in, and he stops his act, and is like, I'm gonna you. No, he says, I'm gonna marry you someday.
Yeah.
And she's like, ha, 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 and he's like,
and then
I'm
he
gonna
basically
stalk
stalked
this
her.
woman. Yeah. So Mr. John Gray wrote this book, which became very popular, and then wrote a couple of books afterwards. These included 1994, Mars and Venus in Love, 1995, Mars and Venus in the Bedroom, 1997, Mars and Venus on a Date, 1997, also Mars and Venus Starting Over, 1999, How to Get What You Want and Want What You Have, 2000, Children Are From Heaven, 2000, Mars and Venus, 365 Ways to Keep the Passion Alive. Other books in 2000 included Men, Women, and Relationships, Mars and Venus Together Forever, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, The Book of Days, Practical Miracles for Mars and Venus, 9 Principles for Lasting Love, Increasing Success, and Vibrant Health in the 21st Century, 2002, Mars and Venus in the Workplace, Truly Mars and Venus, 2003, The Mars and Venus Diet and Exercise Solution, 2007, Why Mars and Venus Collide, Improving Relationships by Understanding How Men and Women Cope Differently with Stress, 2010, Venus on Fire, Mars on Ice, Hormonal Balance, The Key to Life, Love, and Energy, 75 Ways to Say I Love You. There was a co-author, Darren Stevens, who I think wrote horror novels for a while. I couldn't figure out which Darren Stevens did that. How to Release Stress Through Relaxation, Work With Me, The 8 Blind Spots Between Men and Women in Business, and finally, Beyond Mars and Venus in 2017.
He's still writing in 2017?
Well, he also does resonance meditation podcasts. I was looking for more information on him and found that you can download for like $12.99 a meditation technique podcast which guides you through spiritual healing. On Gaia.com, you can purchase Natural Resonance Meditation with John Gray. Searching for a meditation technique that anyone can use, John developed Natural Resonance Meditation, and here he gives us very specific instructions. Calling down divine energy with the help of natural frequencies, such as found in water, fire, flowers, or music, John has devised a simple and beautiful mantra or prayer to ask for blessings of ourselves, our loved ones, and beyond. So Naomi, he's a spiritual guy who worked closely with a showman popularizing pop science in the 1960s and 70s, cares deeply about intentionality, and might think he has advanced insight to a human condition. Cool, cool, cool. I see no problems.
He just really likes astronomy. That's what I'm learning from all these book titles.
That's an interesting point.
Mars and Venus, Mars and Venus.
One thing that I found interesting, and we don't need to explore this too much, is he never really states anywhere in this book that men and women might have relationships that just won't work out. He seems to presume every single relationship people are in can be fixed or resolved just by better communication. And like any instances where a husband's just being a complete bumbling imbecile and like not helping out around the house and, you know, forcing their wife to do all the emotional labor is like completely written off as just like, we need to change your communication style or something.
Did you summarize the entire book in a couple of sentences?
Well, what I find interesting is even though this book is like, you just need to change your communication style. He's released all these other books, which are like the Mars and Venus diet, right? Which would imply to me that, no, there's a lot of things in relationships that need to be fixed, or he's just artificially creating problems in order to sell books.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's what every author does. Self-help author.
See, what a lot of people don't realize, Naomi, is that one of the reasons men and women fall out of love is because they eat too many beans. And there's just a lack of bedroom intimacy because of all the gas. So with the Mars and Venus diet, men, of course, eating too many beans, women eating too many salads, we're going to change the way intimacy
He's pushing
functions.
salads so that he can sell his salad dressings.
Oh my God, Caesar and Cleopatra. Yeah. One other thing that struck me, and I initially was like thinking this almost as a joke, like, this seems weirdly familiar, but after finishing this, I'm like, holy crap, this book first came out in 1992. There have been some other editions, but like 1992 it came out. Steve Harvey's Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man came out in 2009, 17 years later.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap in content. Steve Harvey presents it, I would argue, like in a far more sexist way. And even John Gray is like, look, I completely concede this doesn't apply in all situations. Like, there's going to be people for who this doesn't apply. These are general principles. And Steve Harvey's like, no, 100% this is how all men should act, how all women should act. So Steve Harvey may have ripped him off, but done like a much worse job. We can maybe debate that after we finish. I'm not completely certain. Yeah, so that's, I guess, the big background on John Gray. An interesting individual. One thing that I was unable to determine is whether he actually did any like surveys before starting this. He described at one point having interviewed thousands of people in like research settings or at his seminars about their relationships and like how they perceive stuff. And you would assume that this book might have been derived from like that, but I can't find any evidence that that research ever took place. And it definitely was not peer reviewed.
I really want like him to be like, oh yeah, I did so much research, but it's just him like pulling stuff out of his butt so that he can make his
I read a book about this in my correspondence course.
Yeah, I read about it in my I read about this phenomena in my psychology class.
Right.
My one semester psychology.
We'll talk about that in just a moment, Naomi. For now, I want to get into the introduction to the paperback edition.
Oh, God.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. For our listeners, I should make it clear, this is going to be a lot of really bad advice.
We do not back this advice.
We are more picking apart kind of the rhetoric he's utilizing and whether or not his insights into the human condition have any relevance. But the big theme I want to like just return to time and time again is this information is overly simplistic, also, like Steve Harvey, somewhat misogynistic, and don't feel bad if you don't conform to his ideas of what women and men should be. So anyways, in the introduction, he describes the reason he's writing this book. So he says, with increasing stresses at work and with higher expectations of lasting romance at home, relationships today are challenging for almost everyone. Maybe for someone who's been divorced. I don't know. Gaining a better understanding of where your partner is coming from will certainly make your relationships easier. Increasing tolerance for our differences does not mean passive acceptance of a problematic or passionless relationship. Instead, this healthy adaptation is based on real insight that helps us to understand our partners better and respond in ways that are more loving and will inspire the best in them. You cannot, nor should you ever try to change your partner. That is his or her job. Your job is to change the ways you communicate, react, and respond to your partner. With new insight, you have the added wisdom and power to adjust your approach. With better communication, you can more effectively give the support you seek, and in return, you'll be more successful in getting the support you want. A lot of people misuse the concepts in this book. They use the examples and explanations to justify not making important adjustments that can make a relationship work better. For example, I point out that men often need to go to their cave to recharge from the day. This, however, doesn't justify staying in the cave all the time. On the other hand, I also point out that women generally have a higher need to share feelings in order to cope with stress. This doesn't mean that a woman can just go on or expect a man to stop and listen to whatever she has to say whenever she feels like it. Unfortunately, even good insights can be misused. But if you are seeking to use these insights to understand your partner better, to respect others in the ways that are important to them, and to communicate your needs in a way that they can understand, this book can work for you. In my travels, waiting for a plane or signing books at an event, there's always some couple that will approach me with a similar story. They were previously divorced, and after reading the book, they are now happily remarried to each other. When I wrote this book 12 years ago, I knew it would enrich relationships and even save many on the brink of divorce. But I had no idea that so many people would return to their partners after a divorce or breakup and start over with each other and make their relationship work.
It's not very common for people to get back together after a divorce. Like, I'm listening to what you're saying.
Not a lot of people who are divorced read his book.
Also, not a lot of people that are divorced want to fix a relationship because they obviously got a divorce for a reason. So.
I disagree.
Okay.
Everyone who is divorced should read this book. And his other books, which he describes in detail here in the intro. That's right. You just bought this book and already he's selling you other things.
Is it common for authors to write an introduction like 12 years after they've written the book?
Maybe. I don't know why this was only a hardcover edition to begin with, and this is like the new and improved paperback. So you can like put it in your back pocket as you're, walking somewhere, pull it out, and you have a spare moment.
People really want to see a person, like a man, like women want to see a man walking down the street with this shoved in their back pocket.
Yeah. So he then says, in my subsequent books, I went on to apply the ideas of men are from Mars, women are from Venus to different areas of life where gender understanding is essential. Regarding finding a date, dating, living together, and the engagement process, I wrote Mars and Venus on a date. Regarding long-term relationships and marriage, I wrote Mars and Venus together forever. Regarding the secrets of great sex, I wrote Mars and Venus in the bedroom. For individuals recovering from the loss of love, whether through breaking up, divorce, or death, I wrote Mars and Venus starting over. For those in healthy relationships wishing to sustain those good feelings, I wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the Book of Days. For couples experiencing more challenging problems like infidelity, violence, and addictions, I wrote Mars and Venus in Love. For parents wanting to communicate more effectively with the little Martians and Venusians, I wrote Children Are From Heaven. For those seeking to achieve a competitive edge through gender-based communication skills, I wrote How to Get What You Want at Work. For those suffering from serious illness and seeking empowerment through practical self-healing skills and techniques, I wrote Practical Miracles for Mars and Venus. For those seeking greater personal success, I wrote How to Get What You Want and Want What You Have. And finally, in response to recent research on our hormonal differences as well as differences in brain chemistry, I developed and wrote The Mars and Venus Diet and Exercise Solution. Gender insight also directly relates to our health, happiness, and weight. So he's a cool dude. I don't know if you took away anything from that introduction.
I did. I took away a lot.
Do you have any practical insights for us before we get further into this book?
He's just very... He's milking this like a lot, and he's like talking about like, oh, I could give you sex advice, even though like for me, like you can only give so much sex advice as a woman to a man, you know what I mean? Because like you men don't know what women feel like when they have sex and vice versa. So it's like very strange for me to hear like he's like, I'm gonna be a relationship expert and a sexual expert and a grief counselor, and I'm gonna be a divorce therapist, and I'm gonna try to get everyone back together. And it's like, your shoes can only fit. That's not the way that saying goes.
We're out of practice. God, this is hard.
No, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to hear like, oh, like this man who literally knows nothing about what he's talking about because he took one relationship class and he has an honorary doctorate degree.
Hey, he also spent 17 years studying transcendental meditation, Naomi.
Yeah, with a yogi. I don't think that the yogi was sitting there and being like, so women, they have really good sex when they're in this position? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's kind of the Steve Harvey effect, where Steve Harvey, like, undeniably is a very, like, charismatic, successful individual in the field of, like, business and media, and then is like, well, because I'm competent in this area, I must be competent in other areas.
It's kind of like Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop. Like, she's an actress. I'm not going to say if she's a good or bad actress. She's an actress.
She's appeared in movies.
Yeah, she's appeared in movies, but she definitely does not, like, she didn't go to college and get her, like, skincare degree. What is that? Dermatologist degree. Yeah, she didn't get, like, her degree in, like, OBGY. Like, she's like, oh, let's steam your vagina. You know how bad that is for your pH? Anyways.
Yeah. So he also mentions that 20 years ago, when I began developing and teaching these ideas, they were very controversial, but today they have become widely accepted in our society and referred to at all levels of education, as well in most spiritual traditions. I came to these conclusions after counseling thousands of men and women. Again, no idea where that's coming from. That number kind of comes out of nowhere. But I tried to find this again. I don't recall exactly where it appeared, where he makes a reference to, like, at his seminars, 25,000 people supported what he was saying in surveys that they took. And I wondered almost if the reason so many people were finding, like, insights from his work was because of something called the Barnum effect. So the Barnum effect is manifested in response to statements that are called Barnum statements, meaning general characterizations attributed to an individual that are perceived to be true of them, even though the statements are such generalizations they could apply to almost anyone. So in 1948, in what has been called a classic experiment, psychologist Fourier gave a psychology test to 39 of his psychology students, who were told they receive a brief personality vignette based upon their test results. 1 week later, Fourier gave each of the students a purportedly individualized vignette and asked each of them to rate it on how well it applied. In reality, each student received the same vignette. On average, the students rated its accuracy as 4.3 on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being very poor, 5 being excellent. Only after the ratings were turned in, it was revealed that all the students had received an identical vignette assembled by Fourier from a newsstand astrology book. The vignette contained statements that were vague and general enough to apply to most people. Fourier attributed the effect to gullibility. The effect has been said to confirm the Pollyanna principle, where individuals tend to use or accept positive words of feedback more frequently than negative words of feedback. Now, jumping back to Barnum's effect. Remember, the Barnum effect is manifested in response to statements that are called Barnum statements, general characterizations attributed to an individual perceived to be true of them. Now, such techniques are used by fortune tellers, astrologers, and other practitioners to convince customers that they, the practitioners, are in fact endowed with a paranormal gift. The effect is in a specific example of the so-called acceptance phenomenon, which describes as the general tendency of humans to accept almost any bogus personality feedback. A related and more general phenomenon is that of subjective validation. Subjective validation occurs when two unrelated or even random events are perceived to be related because of a belief, expectation, or hypothesis expects a relationship. So, for example, when reading a horoscope, people actively seek a correspondence between its contents and their perception of their personality. So why am I bringing all of this up?
I don't know. Why are you bringing all this up?
Because it is my belief that the statements contained within Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus are so vague they can apply to practically anyone.
I would agree with that, yeah.
What I also find is interesting is he creates these kind of gendered perceptions of people and these categorizations where he says men act in a certain way, women act in a different way. But then if you dig into the language he's using, you're like, wait, these are describing the same phenomenon. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm thinking, he spent a crazy amount of time with, like, a yogi mystic, which created this mass movement of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. He probably learned a little bit about, like, selling a belief system to individuals. And especially for people who are going through, like, tumultuous times in their life, such as their relationships, they might be a little more open to the idea that, this person has all the answers to solve my problems, because they're looking for what's wrong with them, and he's providing insights or purported insights into that. So later studies of the Fourier effect have found that subjects give higher accuracy ratings if the following are true. The subject believes the analysis applies only to him or her, and thus applies his or her own meaning to the statements. The subject believes in the authority of the evaluator, and the analysis lists mainly positive traits. That's not to say it can't apply elsewhere, but that's where it's most effective. So, with that in mind, let's start on page 1 of this text, Naomi.
Oh my God, we haven't even made it to the first page yet.
Yeah, that was just the preamble. Oh God, what are we, half an hour in? Yep. Great. So he starts by describing an imaginary world. Imagine that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. By the way, take a shot every single time this phrase comes up.
Okay, starting.
This is the day I kill my sister. One day long ago, the Martians, looking through their telescopes, discovered the Venusians. Just glimpsing the Venusians awakened feelings they'd never known. They fell in love and quickly invented space travel and flew to Venus. The Venusians welcomed the Martians with open arms. They had intuitively known that this day would come. Their hearts opened wide to a love that they'd never felt before. The love between the Venusians and Martians was magical. They delighted in being together, doing things together, and sharing together. Though from different worlds, they reveled in their differences. They spent months learning about each other, exploring and appreciating their different needs, preferences, and behavior patterns. For years, they lived together in love and harmony. Then, they decided to fly to Earth. In the beginning, everything was wonderful and beautiful. But the effects of Earth's atmosphere took hold, and one morning, everyone woke up with a peculiar kind of amnesia. Selective amnesia. Both the Martians and Venusians forgot that they were from different planets and were supposed to be different. In one morning, everything they'd learned about their differences erased from that memory. And since that day, men and women have been in conflict.
So he just created a whole new creation story.
Yeah, so he doesn't mean this to be literal. He uses this metaphor to describe this idea that either, and I'm not completely certain this, either men and women are biologically different, like our hormones and our chemistry and our like physical bodies predisposes us to act in certain ways, or men and women are socialized to be different. And neither explanation really holds true consistently throughout the book. Like, this is before, I think, the widespread acceptance of the idea that there's biological sex, which is like physical characteristics, and gender, which is like learned behaviors. And I think a modern sensibility would be like, hey, both gender and sex might play into how men and women act. But no, he seems to conflate the two pretty clearly. So I find it weird because it's a really bad analogy. Like, analogies are useful as like tools to understanding the world, but men and women have never been apart at any point in human civilization, right? Like, there have been isolated groups of, like monks living in the middle of nowhere, but they can't last more than a generation or two without like interacting with women. Like, in order for society to have existed for thousands of years, men and women have always had to like be alongside each other. So this analogy is garbage because he's acting like we're socialized in completely different settings and have like been apart for extended periods of time, but when we're socialized in nearly identical ones. So the response to that might be that he's talking about how male and female social groups teach their members different ways of thinking and acting in the world, but he's very much talking about innate differences because like he never really discusses how men actually learn their behaviors. He's just like, men act like this, deal with it. And he also makes references to like women who have too much testosterone acting more like men. So like he seems to really endorse this like chemical biological perception of gender. I don't fully understand why he considered this to be an effective way of talking about stuff, but I think it's poetic and fits his kind of like mystical worldview, so that's what he went with. Also, the other thing that I think is worth criticizing is because he comes up with this analogy to explain differences between people, he doesn't have to do any research on gender differences or history, right? Like, he doesn't have to know anything about like women's biology. He doesn't have to know anything about like the history of feminism and how women are responding to like struggles in the modern world. He can just pretend that like everything exists in a vacuum and we can kind of tabula rasa our way out of things. I don't know. Does that seem like a fair criticism?
I think he's out of his league.
I think he's out of his league. That's completely fair. So some of the problems with his ideology comes into play immediately. So he says, every day millions of individuals are searching for a partner to experience special loving feelings. Every year, millions of couples join together in love and then painfully separate because they've lost that loving feeling. From those who are able to sustain love long enough to get married, only 50% stay married. Out of those who stay together, possibly another 50% are not fulfilled. They stay together out of loyalty and obligation or from fear of starting over. Very few people indeed are able to grow in love. Yet it does happen. When men and women are able to respect and accept their differences, then love has a chance to bloom. Through understanding the hidden differences of the opposite sex, we can more successfully give and receive the love that's in our hearts. By validating and accepting our differences, creative solutions can be discovered whereby we can succeed in getting what we want. And more important, we can learn how to best love and support the people we care about. Love is magical, and it can last if we remember our differences. See, Naomi, women wear pink and men wear blue. And women, they can't wear jeans because that's what men wear.
Yeah.
They need to wear dresses and skirts.
Yep.
And men, they work in construction,
yeah,
which has big machinery that women can't operate.
Yep.
And women are mommies and homemakers.
And they're nurses and teachers.
This is like a children's understanding of the world.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I recognize that children's understandings of the world are heavily dictated by, society and culture. But like, this is a children's book from like the 1980s where it's like, and daddy has a briefcase and goes to work and mommy wears the pearls and stays at home. It's a really weird way of thinking about things. And I would argue is also kind of sexist. Because it's like, women and men can never fully understand each other, and they're most successful when they embrace the things that make them different.
I love how you said, I feel like this is sexist, but like you don't feel like it is sexist. Like you don't have to feel if it's sexist. It is just
Oh,
sexist.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, he follows that immediately in chapter 2, where he's talking about differences. And he says that Martians value power, competency, efficiency, and achievement. They're always doing things to prove themselves and develop their power and skills. Their sense of self is defined through their ability to achieve results. They experience fulfillment primarily through success and accomplishment. Does that remind you of Steve Harvey? Men have to be at the top of the sandlot, biggest guy on the corner boy on the street.
And even if they're not, you still have to make them feel like they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everything on Mars is a reflection of those values, Naomi. Even their dress is designed to reflect their skills and competence. Police officers, soldiers, businessmen, scientists, cab drivers, technicians, and chefs all wear uniforms or at least hats to reflect their competence and power. They don't read magazines like Psychology Today, Self, or People. They're more concerned with outdoor activities like hunting, fishing, and racing cars. They're interested in the news, weather, and sports, and couldn't care less about romance novels and self-help books. He's had 15 million readers, and 14 million are women. They're more interested in objects and things rather than people and feelings. Even today on Earth, while women fantasize about romance, men fantasize about powerful cars, faster computers, gadgets, gizmos, and new, more powerful technology. Men are preoccupied with the things that can help them express power by creating results and achieving their goals. Achieving goals is very important to a Martian because it's a way for him to prove his competence and thus feel good about himself. And for him to feel good about himself, he must achieve these goals by himself. Someone else can't achieve them for him. Martians pride themselves on doing things all by themselves. Autonomy is a symbol of efficiency, power, and competence. So, yeah, I completely agree with that. Only men wear uniforms designed to reflect their skill and competence. It's well known that women never wear uniforms. Women are never things like nurses, police officers, soldiers, businessmen, scientists, cab drivers, technicians, and chefs.
Yeah, I've never seen a woman actually do a job.
Right.
Yeah, like I've never actually seen that. Like I just go in public and there's just only men doing jobs because I just was under the impression that like women just stayed home.
Yeah. Now, I guess one response would be like, oh, well, he's saying they wear them for different reasons. Like women, they're just wearing pencil skirts in the office to like find a man, right? They don't actually care about power and competence. But I would also argue that like most of those uniforms are kind of an example of form dictates function. Like police officers tend to wear bulletproof vests because it helps protect them from getting shot by bullets, not because they think it's a symbol of power and competence. Maybe that plays a role, I don't know. Scientists wear white lab coats, 1, to protect them from chemicals, and 2, so if they do spill something, they immediately see it and can remove the coat and wash off, right? Like, these aren't things that were chosen because like, oh, it's the color purple, which symbolizes power and royalty, so we will wear purple lab coats. No, it's very much a reflection of the career they've chosen. So it's such a weird way to think about men creating this culture where they get to wear these like symbols of their competence, when in reality it's more of just like a function of social customs, but also like smart decisions to prevent death. I don't know.
Smart decisions to prevent death.
Well, like construction workers, they wear these bright orange things. Yeah. You might be like, oh, bright orange. They're like a peacock presenting themselves. No, it's because orange is the color least found in nature. And so if you're like trying to look and see and not run over people in a big piece of equipment, orange is going to catch your eye pretty quickly.
I think all people should wear orange so they don't get run over.
Yeah. So he's trying to describe this difference between men and women, and the first example he gives to describe how men care about skill and competence by wearing uniforms is just flat out wrong. And we're on page 9, Naomi. This is not a good start.
We're only on page 9?
I know, right? I've cut down so much for this. So the first piece of insight I think he has for women that you need to really internalize. This is something he's already said, and you'll notice he repeats a lot of what he says over and over again. This book could probably be a third of its length if he actually condensed what he has to talk about. He gives an example, just one anecdote from his counseling career. One example was that Tom and Mary were going to a party. Tom was driving, and after about 20 minutes and going around the same block a few times, it was clear to Mary that Tom was lost. She finally suggested that he call for help. Tom became very silent. They eventually arrived at the party, but the tension from that moment persisted the whole evening. Mary had no idea of why he was so upset. From her side, she was saying, I love and care about you, so I'm offering you this help. From his side, he was offended. What he heard was, I don't trust you to get us there. You are incompetent. Without knowing about life on Mars, Mary could not appreciate how important it was for Tom to accomplish his goal without help. Offering advice was the ultimate insult. As we've explored, Martians never offer advice unless asked. A way of honoring another Martian is always to assume he can solve his problem unless he is asking for help. Mary had no idea that when Tom became lost and started circling the same block, it was a special opportunity to love and support him. At that time, he was particularly vulnerable and needed some extra love. To honor him by not offering advice would have been a gift equivalent to his buying her a beautiful bouquet of flowers or writing her a love note.
If you take out all the sexist shit and really condense down his message, it's actually pretty good advice. It's like the basic advice of like, if a person comes to you and is like, hey, we need to talk, you ask them, do you want me to give you advice or do you want me to just let you rant and have a conversation about that? So
what are you talking about? That's only for women. Men never need advice.
You're right.
The first thing that struck me is the phrase, you should never give men advice, which is pretty similar to you should never try to change your partner.
You should never give Martians advice.
Right. Women don't really need advice either. They typically just come to you for like emotional junk.
Yeah.
They're like, I have this problem and I want to rant to somebody, which is also something that Steve Harvey says and something that this author double downs on. But I also find this to be like very much a personality flaw, and I don't think it's something that should be, if it is true, preserved. Like, he never questions whether or not these behaviors are, like, actually really bad. Like, imagine just sitting in the car with Lynn for half an hour. He, like, drives around the block in a dark area. And, you know, you can hear gunshots out in the distance. And, you know, there's, like, a pit of tigers somewhere nearby. And the radio turns on and is like, extra, extra, a bunch of gorillas have escaped the truck nearby and are going for humans. They want blood. At that point, you might be like, hey, it'd be great if we asked for directions. And he'd be like, what the fuck did you say to me?
That's what he's like when he's hangry.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like when I'm
To my point, like, I don't want to be in a relationship where someone can't ask for help. And if this is indeed how men, like, think, then it should be something that's kind of, like, trained out of them. Men should not think that every single time someone approaches them. And again, if he's just saying, oh, this is how men act, that's not how men should act, that's one thing. But he explicitly says, don't try to change your partner. So this is how he thinks men act, and you should just live with it.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that you should put up with your partner's personality defects is crazy. One example he gives is, like, a woman asking her partner to help cut the Thanksgiving turkey, and he's like, shut up. How dare a woman, like, stand up to me and, like, say that I don't know how to cut a Thanksgiving turkey. And I'm like, there's plenty of women out there who have cut turkeys before. They know, like, how to cut turkeys.
I've never heard of a woman cutting a turkey before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So give up on giving advice, Naomi.
Okay.
And to the point about women just wanting to rant, let's talk about how women need to be supported. If a man does not understand how a woman is different, he can make things worse when he's trying to help. Men need to remember that women talk about problems to get close and not necessarily to get solutions. So many times a woman just wants to share her feelings about her day, and her husband, thinking he's helping, interrupts her by offering a steady flow of solutions to her problems. He has no idea why she isn't pleased. For example, Mary comes home from an exhausting day. She wants and needs to share her feelings about the day. She says, there's just so much to do, I don't have any time for myself. Tom says, you should quit that job. You don't have to work so hard. Find something you like to do. What a 90s concept thing. Like, just quit your job. There's plenty of jobs out there.
Plenty of jobs, and I can support us while you're looking for
as a
another
single
job.
Yeah. Mary says, but I like my job. They just expect me to change everything at a moment's notice. Tom says, don't listen to them. Just do what you can do. Mary says, I am. I can't believe I completely forgot to call my aunt today. Tom says, don't worry about it. She'll understand. Mary says, do you know what she's going through? She needs me. Tom says, you worry too much. That's why you're so unhappy. Mary angrily says, I'm not always unhappy. Can't you just listen to me? Tom says, I am listening. Mary says, why do I even bother? After this conversation, Mary was more frustrated when she arrived home seeking intimacy and companionship. Tom was also frustrated, no idea what went wrong. He wanted to help, but his problem-solving tactics didn't work.
Sucks to be him.
Yeah. What you just said is a really good answer to this. It's like, do you want solutions? Do you want emotional support? And that's something more couples need to practice. For Mr. Gray, he's like, no, women just need you to shut up and, like, listen to them rant. Women, am I right? And that's very similar to Steve Harvey being like, women just want to talk about shopping. They want to talk about, was it like that girl Sandra at work who bought the same top that I was wearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as bad, I think, as saying, like, just don't give your man advice, but I think it's also bad to be like, never propose any solutions to problems your significant other might have. I think the better thing is to ask what sort of advice they need at the moment. Do they need like emotional support?
No advice, because they're men.
No, this is women we're talking about. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll use the phrase Mars and Venus to signify, what sex we're talking about. So yeah, he's very much of the view that women mainly just need to rant to somebody and that men should put up with ranting. Nice.
Because somebody in my office was wearing the same blouse as me, and I was really annoyed.
Right. After you had the blouse, you got on sale, and they went and bought it.
It was so bad, and it was like, it triggered me so much, because I had already worn that top, and she was going to copy my top idea.
This is true. I am thinking back on Steve Harvey advice that every woman actually needs 4 men, and it would be great if you could just delegate like 1/4 of your relationship to other people and have them handle that stuff.
Yeah.
One person for the mind-blowing sex, one person for the childcare, one person for giving money, and the last person for gossip. I think that was it. So I've been a little negative on this so far, and I do want to talk about something that I think is decent advice, but I think is applied improperly. So chapter 3 talks about how men go to their caves and women talk. And he says that one of the biggest differences between men and women is how they cope with stress. Men become increasingly focused and withdrawn, while women become increasingly overwhelmed and emotionally involved. At these times, a man's needs for feeling good are different from a woman. He feels better by solving problems, while she feels better by talking about problems. Not understanding and accepting these differences creates unnecessary friction in a relationship. When Tom comes home, he wants to relax and unwind by quietly reading the news. He is stressed by the unsolved problems of the day and finds relief through forgetting them. His wife, Mary, also wants to relax from her stressful day. She, however, wants to find relief by talking about the problems of her day. The tension slowly builds between them, and it gradually becomes resentment. Tom secretly thinks Mary talks too much, while Mary feels ignored. Without understanding their differences, they will grow further apart. So his big insight is, to feel better, Martians go to their caves. They go to like a private room, they read the news, they play a video game, they try to disengage their mind from the problems of the day gradually so that they can relax. And so he says that people who are super stressed will get involved with problems that are even more challenging, like racing a car, competing in a contest, or climbing a mountain. I don't know. A lot of people who are like professional mountain climbers seem pretty well off. That's not to say well-off people can't have problems. It's like, hey, if you spend all year climbing, you probably have decent income and don't have to worry about a lot of problems normal people deal with.
They also have a lot more endorphins than a regular person, because their job is working out.
So when a Venusian becomes upset or is distressed by her day, to find relief, she seeks out someone she trusts and then talks in great detail about the problems of her day. When Venusians share feelings of being overwhelmed, they suddenly feel better. This is the Venusian way. To feel better, Venusians get together and openly talk about their problems. On Venus, sharing your problems with another actually is considered a sign of love and trust and not a burden. Venusians are not ashamed of having problems. Their egos are dependent not on looking competent, but rather on being in loving relationships. They openly share feelings of being overwhelmed, confused, hopeless, and exhausted. Right here, it's interesting because he doesn't seem to think, Martians can learn something from Venusians. He's like, men and women are fundamentally different. They do these crazy things. Men go by themselves. Women talk about problems in an emotionally supportive way. And again, I think this is an area where he can definitely talk about like how both sexes can benefit from finding the benefits of the other option. But also I find his like categorization isn't really true. Do you think when you've been stressed, you've ever retreated into like, I don't know, your room and just watch New Girl on repeat?
Yeah. Stop calling me out like that. Yeah. No, I would definitely say that. And I think that like I was thinking about that while I was like this entire week, I've been like sort of closed off in like my personal relationships because like that's just the way that I am, like when I get really stressed, and especially things that have historical events that have happened in the last week. I just kind of, the way that my mind works is like I have to come to terms with it before I can talk about it. And my boyfriend is the opposite. So all he wants to do is like be around me and like talk about it and like console each other kind of thing. But I'm the opposite, and I'm just like, let me have my time to like reflect on this.
Who wears the chef hat in this relationship, Naomi?
Ratatouille. Remy. Sorry. Remy the rat.
Yeah, so again, he's trying to gender this when I'd argue that both sexes can seek emotional support and both sexes can want alone time. And I think the important takeaway, the non-gendered takeaway is sometimes people in relationships need time to themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes people in relationships need the opportunity to vent about stuff.
And it also depends on the subject. Like, I know that I rant a lot about, like, family stuff, but, like, and he's the same way, but it depends on the family situation. So, like, if something really terrible happens, he'll want to be alone.
Sure. And you know the benefit of non-gendered advice is non-gendered advice can apply to gay couples too.
Oh my God, there's such things as gay couples?
Well, this book isn't called Mars Are From Mars or Men Are Looking for Men from Mars, which would honestly make a lot more sense to me. He never brings up gay couples in this text. I couldn't find a single reference to people who don't fit his like ideal like white collar, white picket fence house of man and woman and 2.5 children. He's very much focused on heterosexual
You always
relationships.
say half a child, and I don't understand what that means. Does that mean that like their child is like top half or bottom half there?
It's a statistics thing. It's like people on average would have 2.5. So some people have 2 and some people have 3.
Oh my God.
Look, it's a saying from the 1990s. The point I'm trying to make is if you offer non-gendered advice, your advice can apply to more relationships and you can sell more books to different people.
What?
But it's also crazy to me because he talks about how much men have in common, how much Martians have in common, how much women have in common. They lived on separate planets and they got along really, really well. So you'd think that he'd think gay relationships would be super strong, right?
No. There's no such thing as gay people in this world.
Oh, I guess that's accurate.
Yeah.
Well, there's women who have too much testosterone. He does like talking about them.
Yeah, but they're only attracted to men.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's important.
They just want more testosterone.
Well, one of the reasons that men and gay relationships might not work out is because of how men think. See, when men first saw Venusians, his body lit on fire. As he watched them for the first time in his life, he began to care about someone other than himself. From just one glimpse, his life had new meaning. His depression lifted. See, Martians have a win-lose philosophy, Naomi. I want to win, and I don't care if you lose. As long as each Martian took care of himself, this formula worked fine. It worked for centuries, but now it needed to be changed. Giving primarily to themselves was no longer as satisfying. Being in love, they wanted the Venusians to win as much as themselves. So he thinks all men are focused on conquest, very much like Steve Harvey. That's why there are no male teachers and no men who like coach little league games and no men who support other people in their careers in business. No priests trying to help people find spiritual like enlightenment. Yeah, men are just focused on being on top. And they really need women to calm down that. Actually, now I'm wondering what he thinks about priests. If he's like, priests are so weird because they don't have a Venusian in their life. That's an interesting question. But that's also why gay relationships don't work out, Naomi. Because Martians just stick to themselves and focus only on their individual conquest. I guess the same would apply for Venusians, maybe. I don't know. Venusians offer emotional support. That's why there's so many more lesbians. God, this all makes sense. It's like, Naomi's just sitting here in shock.
Yeah, I think you're just talking yourself through, like, your questions, and I'm just staring at you, and you're, like, asking me, but I'm not coming up with the answers. You are.
Yeah. So the first Martian spies Venusians through a telescope, and he falls in love with them, and he feels completely different. And after he does that, Naomi, he began manufacturing telescopes for all of his brother Martians. They've somehow mastered space travel, but still figuring out never mind. So very quickly, they all came out of their depressions. They too began to feel love for Venusians. They started to care about the Venusians as much as themselves. The strange and beautiful Venusians were a mysterious attraction to the Martians. Their differences especially attracted the Martians. Where the Martians were hard, the Venusians were soft. Where the Martians were angular, the Venusians were round. Where the Martians were cool, the Venusians were warm. In a magical and perfect way, the differences seemed to complement each other. In an unspoken language, the Venusians communicated loud and clear. We need you. Your power and strength can bring us great fulfillment, filling a void deep within our being. Together we could live in great happiness. This invitation motivated and empowered the Martians. Many women instinctively understand how to give this message. In the beginning of a relationship, a woman gives a man a brief look that says, you could be the one to make me happy.
Oh.
In this subtle way, she actually initiates their relationship. This look encourages him to come closer. It empowers him to overcome his fears of having a relationship. Unfortunately, once they're in a relationship and as the problem begins to emerge, she doesn't know how important that message still is to him and neglects to send it. So this is interesting. The first thing that John Gray believes is that men are only attracted to women when women look different from men. So women with like pixie cuts, women who work out, women who like have jobs that keep them outside and have like rough, leathery, tan skin, women who pursue careers similar to men.
Women
they're not
with
attractive.
A lot of testosterone.
Yeah, this is what Steve Harvey believes, that like women, no matter how successful, need to tone themselves down for their man.
Yeah.
And in the same way, like women are only attracted to like big, hunky He-Man, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. They're never attracted to like internet e-boys who are like super skin and pale from spending too much time indoors and wear like vaguely feminine clothing and like dress in gender non-conforming ways and like are emotionally open and vulnerable. That's never something women are attracted to, right? The other thing that I think is interesting is he's like, in order to start relationships, women give off this signal, which seems kind of victim blamey. He's like, if a man's pursuing a woman, she must have given him that signal, right? Like that's the only way relationships start, is a woman like leading him on.
A woman gets raped because she gave him the signal that she wanted to have sex with him.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely doesn't feel like a good message to be sending. So he's talking about this, and the following page, he says, when a man is in love, when he glimpses the Venusians and has unselfish feelings, he's motivated finally to be the best he can be in order to serve others. When his heart is open, he feels so confident in himself that he is capable of making major changes. Given the opportunity to prove his potential, he expresses his best self. Only when he feels he cannot succeed does he regress back to his old selfish ways. When a man is in love, he begins to care about another as much as himself. He is suddenly released from the binding chains of being motivated for himself alone and becomes free to give to another, not for personal gain, but out of caring. So it turns out all those like bishops giving back to the community and like spiritual enlightenment, they're married, Naomi, because they have a woman in their lives.
Shit, okay.
Moving on. What I find is weird about this is he's like, people are at their best, or men are at their best when they're in relationships. I feel like I know a lot of douchey people who are in relationships.
I know so many douchey people in relationships. I've been in relationships with douchey people.
Right, because they're like, look what I'm getting, right? Like, look how much better I am at life and living than you are, right? Look at this piece of ass I picked up.
I don't think it's that. I think that they're just like, I need to be in a relationship to like secure myself as a man in society when they're all just secretly gay.
Do you want to talk about this? No, I just fundamentally dispute that people in relationships are the best, and I also don't really see where he says whether or not women are better in a relationship. Like, he describes it at the beginning of the book, but then doesn't really return to it, and I almost wonder if it's because a lot of women are happier being single, right? Like, if one of their biggest complaints in relationships is that men don't open up and that men retreat and men don't know how to like engage them emotionally, you'd think they'd either be happier with other Venusians or by themselves. In many ways, he describes these situations where men only make relationships harder for women and women only make relationships easier for men. And I don't really see what they're getting out of this besides like fulfilling some social expectation to pair up. I don't know. The other criticism I have in this section is he talks about how, like, Martians change over time and become better, and he says, this same change commonly takes place in men and women as they mature. In their younger years, a woman is much more willing to sacrifice and mold herself to fulfill her partner's needs. In a man's younger years, he is much more self-absorbed and unaware of the needs of others. As a woman matures, she realizes how she may have been giving herself up in order to please her partner. As a man matures, he may realize how he can better serve and respect others. As a man matures, he also learns he may be giving up himself. His major change is becoming more aware of how he can succeed in giving. Likewise, as a woman matures, she also learns new strategies for giving, but her major change tends to be learning to set limits in order to receive what she wants. So it's interesting where he's like, the longer a woman's in a relationship and the older she gets, the more she recognizes how she's not getting what she needs, which is weird. But also he's like, men become their best self as they age. And I've interacted with a lot of douchey senior citizens, both like internally in their relationships, but also like in public, how they like just harass service workers.
They're just mad because everything on their body hurts and they can't do anything about it.
That must be it, Naomi. Thank you for excusing their behavior. But yeah, it just seems like a weird thing to say. Like, it's not to say it can't happen, but I would argue that as people age, they become more entitled in a lot of ways, and they become more resilient to like accepting that people are different around them, which is partially what explains this like political landscape we're in right now. I don't know. I don't want to veer too much off track, but I guess what I'm getting at is he's trying to offer all these like keen insights into the psyche of people, which I feel like just talking out doesn't support his assertions. Just giving some counterexamples kind of diffuses the whole point. And he's trying to make this advice guide as applicable as possible for people, when in reality, he's giving these like broad generalizations that might apply to some individuals, but ultimately, like, a lot of people are going to vary from the mold. Yeah, the last thing that he talks about is how women can set limits. And I think this might be where we wrap up for this session. And this is not a horrible example of like how women can set limits. It's just deeply concerning that he thinks this is how women should assert themselves in relationships, and not women should be breaking up with people who force them to do this. So he says, most important, a woman needs to recognize her boundaries of what she can give without resenting her partner. Instead of expecting her partner to even the score, she needs to keep it even by regulating how much she gives. So it's never a problem of your husband not doing dishes. It's a problem of you doing too many dishes, Naomi.
Oh, crap.
Yeah.
Who's going to do all the dishes?
That's a really good question. Let's look at an example. Jim was 39 and his wife Susan was 41 when they came for counseling. Susan wanted a divorce. Susan, get a divorce. Susan, please. Susan, if this book was written in 1992, you're still alive, probably, Susan. You can escape this. She complained that she'd been giving more than he had for 12 years and could not take it in anymore. She blamed Jim for being lethargic, selfish, controlling, and unromantic. Martians, am I right? She said she had nothing left to give and was ready to leave. He convinced her to come to therapy, but she was doubtful. This is weird, too, because he said that Martians don't like self-help. They tend to solve their problems by themselves. So the idea that men would initiate... Okay. In the 6-month period, they were able to move through the 3 steps for healing a relationship. Today, they're happily married with 3 children. Blink twice if you're okay, Susan.
I just don't believe that. So
step 1 is motivation. I explained to Jim that his wife was experiencing 12 years of accumulated resentment. If he wanted to save this marriage, he would have to do a lot of listening for her to be motivated to work on their marriage. For the first 6 sessions together, I encouraged Susan to share her feelings and help Jim patiently understand her negative feelings. This was the hardest part of the healing process. As he began to really hear her pain and unfulfilled needs, he became increasingly motivated and confident he could make the changes necessary to have a loving relationship. Before Susan could be motivated to work on the relationship, she needed to be heard and feel that Jim validated her feelings. This was the first step. So 6 sessions, let's say an hour together. It's just 6 hours of her being like, and you never take out the trash, and holy shit, you forget every single holiday and anniversary.
I just don't understand why they needed a mediator for this and why they couldn't just do it in the... Like, I'm all for therapy, right, but I also don't understand why it took him getting, like, her getting to that point where he was like, okay, it's time for therapy, and then he actually fucking listened.
Like, the lesson that I think should be taken away from here is not men need to listen to their partners, which is not a bad lesson. It's women should not put up with as much shit as this.
Yeah.
Waiting 12 years to work out these problems indicates that, like, we need to have this complete, like, societal re-education camp where everyone goes in and women learn not to put up with this shit and men learn to be less shitty partners, right? Like, the problem is very much the man's issue. And the fact that the woman was able to, like, put up with this for so long is a testament to her patience and, like, socialized training to be polite, not that she was a bad person. So it's crazy to me that we're even at this point. I'm not saying it's bad advice to listen to your partner and allow them to vent, but holy shit, you have so much to make up for. If it's 12 years of resentment, 6 hours of her venting. The next step was taking responsibility. Jim needed to take responsibility for not supporting his wife, while Susan needed to take responsibility for not setting boundaries. I'm so sorry, Jim, for not setting boundaries and allowing you to walk all over me. Sometimes I allow you to put on boots and just step on my face and, like, crack my ribs a little. And that's my fault for not saying I didn't want my ribs cracked.
Yeah.
Jim apologized for the ways he'd hurt her. I'm sorry. Susan realized that as he had stepped over her boundaries by treating her in disrespectful ways, such as yelling, grumbling, resisting requests, and invalidating feelings, "You whore, how dare you ask me to do the dishes?" She had not set her boundaries. Although she did not need to apologize, she did acknowledge some responsibilities for their problems. As she gradually accepted that her inability to set limits and her tendency to give more had contributed to their problems, she was able to be more forgiving. Taking responsibility for her problem was essential to releasing her resentment. In this way, they both were motivated to learn new ways of supporting each other through respecting limits.
So that's where we're going to wrap up the episode.
Oh, no, we need to talk that first.
I have no words for that. Like, I literally have no words.
Honestly, Susan needs to apologize to herself for doing this to herself.
Susan needs to apologize to herself and then get herself a divorce.
I want to say it was in The Gift of Fear. Gavin DeBecker was talking about how women who are in abusive relationships need to take responsibility for their abuse. And the way he phrased it was like really weird, but he kind of articulates an argument where I'm like, okay, I understand that. He's, look, you continue to stay with people who beat your children and like assault you and make your life miserable. If you think you have no other options, you're going to put up with this. If you recognize that in one way you are responsible by not leaving, then you can take control over that situation and consider that option as a reality. And in the same way, it's like, yeah, women need to recognize that they're responsible for not putting up boundaries, apologize to themselves for not setting up boundaries, and leave their partner who yells at them when they ask for like, hey, can I get a card or something on my birthday at bare minimum? This just seems really, really bad. But it gets worse, Naomi. You wanted to end this, but you forgot about step 3, which is practice. Jim particularly needed to learn how to respect her boundaries, while Susan needed to learn how to set them. Both of them needed to learn how to express honest feelings in a respectful way. They agreed in this 3rd step to practice setting and respecting limits, knowing at times they would make mistakes. Being able to make mistakes gave them a safety net of what they practiced. I wrote in the margins of this, I have a lot of notes on this book, but in the margins here, before I even read this section, I'm like, these all seem like red flags, ? These are some examples of what they learned in practice.
I'm sorry, you had to put a question mark after that?
I was starting.
That should have been a period.
This is page 51 of 320. So I was still, this is bad advice. I'm not sure whether or not it's like all bad or there's like a mixture. So here are some examples of what they learned and practiced. Susan practiced, I don't like the way you're talking. Please stop yelling or I'll leave the room. After leaving the room a few times, she didn't need to do it anymore. You know, I'm a big fan of allowing my husband to make mistakes and scream at me. And the way I'm going to react is not walking out of the door and going into a hotel or sleeping at my sister's. It's waiting for him to stop yelling at me. And instead, he's just going to gaslight me subtly moving forward. When Jim would make requests that she would later resent doing, she practiced saying, no, I need to relax, or no, I'm too busy today. She discovered he was more attentive to her because he understood how busy or tired she was. I don't hate that. It's similar to what we've talked about a number of times where like women just need to practice saying no. And I think practicing saying no is really, really important. I don't think you need to qualify it though. You should be able to just say no to your partner and have them respect that.
No.
Susan told Jim she wanted to go on vacation. And when he said he was too busy, she said she'd go alone. Suddenly he shifted his schedule and wanted to go. So he was like, again, gaslighting her into like not doing something she wanted to do until she was like, okay, I'll go have fun without you. He was like, oh, fuck. What am I going to do? I can't cook at home. My wife's the only one who knows how to cook and clean. I'm going to do what Steve Harvey did and just eat pizza on my lazy boy while watching ESPN and ESPN2.
Oh my God.
We're going to keep returning to Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey is a primordial model.
That was probably one of the worst parts of the book.
Yeah. When they talked and Jim interrupted, she practiced saying, I'm not finished. Please hear me out. Suddenly, he started listening more and interrupting less. Susan's most difficult task was to practice asking for what she wanted. She said to me, why should I have to ask after all I've done for him? I explained that making him responsible for knowing her wants was not only unrealistic, but a big part of her problem. She needed to be responsible for getting her needs fulfilled. Hey, it's 11:58 on the day of my birthday, and you haven't said anything to me, and I'd really like it if you could like just give me like a peck on the cheek or something and say happy birthday, honey.
Like, I understand that sometimes you have to communicate and be like, hey, I would appreciate it if you bought me more flowers. why do you have to communicate to the point where like you're literally guiding the person through the relationship in order to ensure that you're happy in the relationship?
This is how you treat a child, right? It's like, hey, I could use some help. Can you go take out the garbage? Can you please go? Mommy would really like it if you took out the garbage. I'll be so happy. Oh, what a good boy. Also, how you talk to a dog. Last thing is, Jim's most difficult challenge was to be respectful of her changes and not expect her to be the same accommodating partner he originally married. I can't walk all over my wife anymore. I have a hard day at the office. I just want to come home and clomp all over my wife's face.
I'm just going to say it. I don't like Jim.
He recognized it was as difficult for her to set limits as it was for him to adjust to them. He understood they would become graceful as they had more practice. As a man experiences limits, Naomi, he is motivated to give more. Through respecting limits, he automatically is motivated to question the effectiveness of his behavior patterns and start making changes. When a woman realizes in order to receive she needs to set limits, then automatically she begins to forgive her partner and explore new ways of asking for and receiving support. When a woman sets limits, she gradually learns to relax and receive more. So I'm going to take some advice from the Venusians, and I think we need to set limits and stop this episode very soon.
No! Sorry, what?
Okay. Yeah. Do you feel good? Do you feel you've overcome your trauma by saying
no? I feel icky.
Yeah, like, again, in a nutshell, if you boiled this down to, like, a couple of sentences, the advice wouldn't be so bad. It's like, listen to your partner. Be responsive to like your partner's needs. But he drags it out in this excruciating detail that victim blames the woman. And I don't know why so many people found this compelling. I think a lot of people who are on the last legs of the relationship, and again, socialized to think that relationships are good, might find this helpful and be like, oh my God, this person knows so much. I'm going to start applying this. But other people who have like been in abusive relationships and like recognize harmful behavior patterns are probably going to look at this and be like, what the fuck? And that's also probably why he last released a new edition in 2017 and hasn't released anything sooner.
I think he died.
No, he's still alive making transcendental meditation.
Is he old and senile?
We can only hope. He was born in 1951, Naomi. He's getting older. He's up there.
Yeah, but he's not old.
Look, Naomi, we're being really down on this guy, but we could contact him and co-write a book together.
Oh, God, no.
Like horror author Darren Stevens.
Men are from Mars and women are the sane ones.
Yeah, but also men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and have like 50 asterisks after it. And then a really tiny font at the bottom and be like, except this doesn't apply in these situations. How you feeling about this first part?
I don't like it, but I hope that everyone has a great week. We hope that you support people with uteruses, and we love you all. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for putting up with this. We're going to have more highly enjoyable, highly traumatizing content next week.
Woohoo!
Bye for now, y'all. We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at Date These Guys, or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you're looking to make an impact in the world, this show strongly recommends Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization that provides reproductive health care in the United States. Planned Parenthood provides birth control, long-acting reversible contraceptive implants, clinical breast examinations, pregnancy screenings, prenatal care, testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and abortions. They also do great work for those who are lower income. 4/5 of their clients are at or below 50% of the federal poverty line. Both Joel and Naomi are monthly donors to Planned Parenthood. We hope you will be too.